Welcome to Boxing During Dinner, back after the Guerrero-Mayweather fight, which I was at. David, not so much. He watched it on TV.
Yep.
To be fair, I actually watched it on TV as well because I was in the media room because I didn't want to sit way up there. But no complaints. Great atmosphere in Vegas. Get to hang out with a lot of cool people, which I want to mention a few. I got to hang out and talk to a few people this weekend. They had some good inputs on the fight. Chris Mannix, who I've read a lot of his stuff and I've seen him at the fights over there, had never really had the chance to meet him. And
from Sports Illustrated.
Very good writer. Matt Donovan from Showtime, Jaime Mota from Univision. This one random girl, Chantel, who's from Canada. Not a boxing writer, but a huge fan of sports.
I hope you're talking about Miss Jackson.
No, not Miss Jackson. This girl's from Vancouver, British Columbia.
Okay.
And Michelle Rosado, who we met for the first time. She does some stuff with Gabriel Rosado and is one of the up-and-coming, PR marketing people in boxing with different fighters. So, I just wanted to shout out to them.
Cheers to you folks.
And David, the fight itself went as expected.
Yeah, Robert Guerrero just absolutely destroyed Floyd Mayweather.
Robert Guerrero dominated from the first round. I thought it was a horrible decision. Harold Letterman's a good friend of the show, and Julie was one of the judges. I don't know what she was watching. I had Guerrero winning the fight 118 to 110. Mayweather did absolutely nothing. He just ran.
Yeah.
Played that, pitter-patter stuff. I didn't like it. I wonder how many people actually believed.
Well, all you have to do is look at Twitter after a Floyd Mayweather fight to hear people bitching and complaining about, he was running around the whole time, and I don't pay pay-per-view money to see that kind of stuff, and I'm just like, I don't even really bother with that stuff. It doesn't even faze me anymore, because what you saw on Saturday night was the mastercraft of boxing at its absolute peak. I think for people to say that Floyd Mayweather won that fight 117-111 is an insult to the performance that he put on. For people to even think that Robert Guerrero won those first two rounds when Mayweather looked ordinary is still an insult to Mayweather. I think anything other than 120-108 is wrong.
There was a couple rounds that Guerrero had his moments.
No.
I don't know if they were warranted to give him the round, but Mayweather won easy. He's still the best in boxing at 36 years old. The guy has an incredible skill set. Every time he hit Guerrero, he would just make him miss. He would make him look stupid. And Robert Guerrero is one of the best welterweights in the world.
And that's another thing. People are complaining, the level of opponent, he's handpicking his opponents. Fine, maybe to an extent that he's picking among the elite fighters in his division on who to fight. But he took on the number one contender, the interim title holder for his title belt, and beat the hell out of him.
Who just beat Andre Berto. And, we're going to talk about what's next for Floyd Mayweather, but we want to bring on a very special guest. Out of all those people that I said I met, I was talking to in Vegas and that I've met and all that, this one is the coolest.
Polar bear cool.
Polar bear cool, exactly. Alaska cool, Antarctica cool. It's Sir Kieran Mulvaney.
Yep.
I'm already knighting him. From,
he's been knighted from afar.
From ESPN.com, amongst other things.
HBO, Reuters, Reuters, REU, not ROID. Kieran has not used her performance-enhancing drugs.
Kieran doesn't hang out with Barry Bonds. But Kieran, welcome to Boxing During Dinner once again. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. What exactly do you mean when you call me a special guest? What's the term special? I was saying, right?
Yeah, sure. That's what we meant.
Exactly. So Kieran, you were ringside for the Mayweather-Guerrero fight. Absolute brilliant performance by Mayweather. What did you witness that night? Mayweather, does he ever stop impressing the boxing public?
Look, I thought he was incredible. And I agree with David. I actually had it 120-108. I could see an argument for a couple of rounds, but I bought into. I thought Mayweather would win the fight. I thought he'd win the fight convincingly. I actually thought he might stop Robert Guerrero, but I had bought into the line that his footwork wasn't as good as it used to be, and that what would probably happen was that Guerrero would get close to him and he'd try to maul him, and that Floyd would work him over inside with uppercuts and right hands, but I was stunned. I must admit, I was stunned that he turned the clock back and showed such brilliant footwork, as well as the in-close defense and body movement. And the fact that he was able to glide across the ring and glide into whatever position he wanted to land his right hand, I thought it was absolutely stunning. It was a masterclass.
I think amen to that. I agree that the footwork to me was probably what was most impressive. I mean, Mayweather's always been known for throwing that lead right hand and slipping away. but he did a lot of dancing that you haven't seen in recent fights, and maybe that's partly to blame for him getting hit cleanly by guys like Cotto and Mosley. But yeah, that to me is what really stuck out, is that footwork was just absolutely unbelievable. He looked as good as he's ever looked, and he's 36, coming off a year of, quote unquote ring rust, a little bit of time in prison. Kieran, I have to co-sign on that 100%, which is easy for me to say because you're the expert, but.
But yeah, and for those people who say, he just ran around all of that, but how do you land 60% of your power punches if you're running around? That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and look at Robert Guerrero's face and say that the guy who was hitting him was running around.
Yeah, and Robert Guerrero's, no pushover like we were saying. I mean, he's one of the best at welterweight. Southpaw fighter, interim champion, beat Andre Berto's, beaten many guys along his career. So the naysayers, the critics are going to say that, Mayweather never fights anybody. Who's he going to fight now? Who is he going to duck? Who do you think he fights next? There's not much more we can say about that fight except it was a brilliant performance. So who does he fight next? Because I'm of the opinion that there's no way in hell that the Canelo fight comes in September and not next year when they could probably monetize it even further.
No, I agree with you. It won't be Canelo Alvarez, and partly that will be Canelo Alvarez's doing, because he's not going to take $3 million to Floyd's $30 million the way that Robert Guerrero did. He's not going to come down to 147. He's going to say, look, I just put 40,000 people in an arena in San Antonio, which you've never done. So that leverage, that dance is going to be very difficult. And in return, Floyd's going to say, yeah, well, you've never headlined a pay-per-view. So, I think it's fair to say, I'm not saying that fight will never happen, but I think it's fair that Alvarez needs to build up his credibility, if you will, to be able to force some kind of concessions from Floyd. I suspect he will fight one of Danny Garcia, the Lamont Peterson Lucas Matisse winner, or perhaps Amir Khan. I would guess, if I'm going to take a guess right now, I would imagine that the fact that Al just signed Lucas Matisse might mean that if Matisse gets past Lamont Peterson, that's the next fight. And I think of those ones that are available, I think that's probably the most intriguing. The one problem that I have, right, after what he did on Saturday night, and I don't know what you guys think, right, is that if Amir Khan fought, say, for example, Danny Garcia, Lamont Peterson, Devin Alexander, Lucas Matisse in a row, we'd make him fighter of the year. But if Floyd does it, he's so established his complete superiority that everyone's just going to yawn, and so, which is unfair. And so I think even though he has 5 great performances in him, he may find it hard because of his superiority to get a lot of people really excited no matter who he fights next, except for Canelo.
No, you're absolutely right. And, there was a point in time, Kieran, where I was about to crown Amir Khan the best fighter ever. and then he lost to Lamont Peterson. But
and to Danny Garcia afterwards.
But of all those fighters Kieran mentioned, obviously, Lucas Matisse is the strongest storyline. If he gets past Peterson, he would have beaten a good fighter. Amongst the ones that he's already beaten, he's a superb puncher. There always exists a chance of what if he lands one on Floyd's chin? What happens? Because I don't really want to see him fight Amir Khan. Amir Khan, to me, is damaged goods. We saw him against Julio Diaz, who was 137 years old, and almost knocked him out. So I agree with Kieran that the Canelo fight is not going to happen next. I think Canelo's going to end up fighting Miguel Cotto on the September 14th weekend, which should be a sellout at the MGM Grand for the Mexican Independence weekend. I also think that Floyd will probably take a few more months off to heal his hand and maybe fight in November. So Golden Boy can make that Cotto Canelo fight. He's not stupid. He's a businessman, right, which is why he made $32 million for this fight
before pay-per-view.
So getting away from Floyd, Kieran, Abner Mares. David and I were talking earlier. I thought that was his best performance of his career. The fact that he went from 122 to 126, I think, helped him a lot. He didn't have to drain himself. He spoke to me and he said that he had been draining himself. He was even afraid that he wouldn't be able to make 126. So how did you like his performance against Daniel Ponce de Leon, who's a very awkward fighter and one of the hardest hitters in boxing?
I'm going to do a really unsubtle humble brag here and say, as I was saying to Liev Schreiber after the fight, or in fact, as Liev Schreiber was saying to me, as we hung out and talked, All he wanted to talk about actually was brilliant. Was that just? I mean, I've always wanted to be able to say that, and I'm going to keep saying it. All he wanted to talk about was Abner Mares, right? And I thought it was a tremendous performance. Ponce de Leon, people look at him as just this, big tough guy who knocks people out. But my God, he's such an awkward fighter. He's so hard to look good against. Just the way you can't predict the angle and the way he's going to throw that left hand, and his defense is awkward. And I love the way Abner would kind of bounce outside, look for an opportunity, bang, land a punch. I thought it was absolutely beautiful. A terrific performance by Abner Mares. A real star-making performance, I thought.
I agree wholeheartely. It was interesting to me, too, that Abner Mares had been constantly hyping up how good he was going to look in this fight. And I'm sure it was partly because, he's the co-feature on a major pay-per-view, but I was blown away. I mean, you look at the fights against Agbeko and his fight against, I'm going to forget the...
Moreno.
Kamo Moreno. He looked like a boxer in this fight, which is something we haven't seen from him in a really long time. We're just known as him being that raging guy who comes in with his head down, hitting people in the balls, and he put on a mastercraft performance himself.
And he got hit in the balls this time.
Yeah, this time he did take one, which I suppose evens the score a little bit. But at 126, there's so many fights that you'd like to see him in, and most of them we probably won't get to see. But he looked wonderful. And one of the things that the Mars did in this fight, it was his best performance. And it was Nonito Donaire's worst performance in his last fight. Yeah. So, this is a fight that was hyped and talked about for so long. And it may not even happen. But right now, I think Abner Mares would beat Donaire in a fight. And what was weird, Kieran, when after Ponce de Leon hit him low, and all of a sudden he took off his mask and it was Joseph Agbeko. I could not believe it. It was such a weird moment in the fight, and then the real Daniel Ponce de Leon came back into the ring and finished the fight. But odd moments at the MGM Grand. I mean, we're running a little bit out of time, Kieran, so we want to ask you a couple questions before you go. Pacquiao Rios, David's excited about that fight. Yeah, it's I'm kind of surprised to an extent that Top Rank would make this, but it seems like to me, because they're going all in on two fighters. And one of them loses is effectively, damaged goods as far as a financial standpoint, I think. Especially Pacquiao, to an extent, Rios as well. A lot of people, the odds are 4-1 in favor of Pacquiao, which I think makes a lot of sense. He's the faster guy, and he's the welterweight. Rios is coming up in class, but what do you think of that? I've heard a lot of differing opinions, which has been striking to me, so I don't really know what to expect. I have my ideas, but I'm curious to hear what you think.
Well, I think I was surprised to see some people in that great world of online criticizing the fact that Pacquiao fighting Rios instead of the guy who just beat him. But Manny Pacquiao just took a 5-minute nap on the canvas in the MGM Grand, and to come back and fight somebody like Brandon Rios is immense. Rios can crack. He's got a heck of a chin. He's the style that Manny Pacquiao wants, right? It's going to be a fight. But at the same time, if Pacquiao's damaged goods, he's done after this fight. Like, Rios could finish him, and I think you're exactly right. I think if Rios loses, unless he loses spectacularly badly, he's still valid because he's not going to be perceived to have fought at a superstar level before, and there's a third fight with Alvarado is still valid. If Pacquiao loses, Rios is huge and Pacquiao is done. It's over if he loses this fight.
High risk, high reward. And one of the points, too, I've also heard that the reason that Rios got this fight, or perhaps it's bluster from underneath, is that Mike Alvarado actually had surgery to repair a tendon in his right hand, which they weren't sure would heal entirely in time for this fight, and he apparently was neglecting his rehab. Whether or not I actually believe that is, a different story, of course. Who knows? But that's what it's being said.
And as Kieran was saying, the 5-minute nap that Pacquiao took, it's when they actually do fight, Kieran, it's going to be about 11 months, almost a year, to the date that Pacquiao lost to Juan Manuel Marquez by a knockout. And like you said, that's what makes it intriguing. He's fighting a terrific puncher, one of the best in boxing, one fight after getting knocked out. Do you think the 11 months that he would have been out of the ring recuperating from that knockout is enough? Or do you think Pacquiao's chin's still going to be questionable and Rios is going to try to expose it right away?
I mean, if it's not enough, then it's not enough, right? But I mean, I asked Freddie about that. Has he had a chance to look at him? What does he think? And Freddie's certainly happy that it's in November. You know, Manny wanted to come back in April, and Freddie didn't want that. Then there was talk about September, and Freddie said he was pretty happy it didn't happen then. So he's certainly happy that it's going to be in November rather than any time sooner. And well, I guess we'll just see. I mean, I have absolutely no idea. That was such a brutal knockout that, and he'd been slipping before that anyway, I think. So who knows? I mean, who knows what he has left? A year ago, I would have said Manny would probably beat Rios. 2 years ago, I would have said he would definitely beat Rios. And now I don't know. I think it's a 50-50 fight.
Yeah, I agree. I hate to, disagree with everything our guests say. We're not trying to blow Kieran or anything, although he's a pretty cool dude and we like him and he's our friend. But I agree with everything he said tonight. And before you go, Kieran, this past weekend, really quickly, Vladimir Klitschko knocked out a renowned Italian chef, Francesco Pianetta. He was cooking some penne pasta and with some Italian sausage, and all of a sudden he comes in and fights and gets killed. The punch dad was one of the worst I've ever seen in my life. It was like 120 punches landed to like 3.
Poor guy.
Do you think Vladimir Klitschko finally takes my advice and your advice and fights a polar bear next?
Well, it would be the first time he'd be at a weight disadvantage, of course, although I think most commissions would actually have a bit of a problem with the 800-pound weight disadvantage.
But if they could approve the Italian chef, I mean, they could approve a polar bear.
I mean, there are obstacles in place. There are certainly obstacles, but let's not rule it out.
Yeah, he might insist that the polar bear comes in under 1,000 pounds on the night, and
after rehydration, of course.
All right, Kieran. So thanks for being on Boxing During Dinner. With that, we'll wrap up Boxing During Dinner for this week. And next week, something I do want to talk about, that Malignaggi-Broner press conference, which they were mother effing each other in front of kids and showing pictures of nudie pictures.
June 22nd.
But anyway, we'll talk about that next week. So hope you enjoyed Boxing During Dinner.